to begin by our first speaker, Fiona White, about e-contact.
Thanks, Anya. Thanks, everyone. Miles isn't on the slide, but he's there in spirit. And he's definitely there in all the theoretical reviews that I've conducted to create this new approach to contact. Now, let's just go through a quick preview of what I'm trying to do here with e-contact. So just basically coming very much from an experimental point of view of contact, trying to create a new strategy of contact, and very much focusing on prejudice reduction. So these are kind of interventions, strategies to reduce prejudice. So it's really a piece of work that's lasted a decade. So I'm trying to fit it in 15 minutes, okay? So let's see how we go. So rationale for e-contact, and I'm just going to go quickly through one of my, I guess, largest scale projects that took 3 years, a longitudinal design involving Muslim and Christian students in New South Wales. And then a more lab-based, a newer version of e-contact that I've developed, mainly because that first kind of fieldwork experimental study nearly killed me. So it was very resource dependent, but I'm hoping that this lab-based shorter version still has the nuances and the essence of Allport's contact theory that I tried to have in the fieldwork versions. And then, of course, like all good scientists, kind of come up with some strengths and limitations of when might e-contact actually not be good? When might it not be the most effective strategy? I think that's really important for all of us to ask us. When are our strategies not particularly useful for promoting harmony and reducing prejudice? So the challenges pretty much come from Steffi's latest publication, well, not latest, but one of her more recent ones, about having opportunities for intergroup contact being often missed in multicultural societies such as Australia and the US and the UK. And that, you know, mostly self-reported contact is positive, it's beneficial, but it's avoided. And getting to engage in contact, you know, that momentum, that motivation, how do we engage people in contact? That's the kind of stage of the contact process that I'm interested in here, particularly with e-contact. There's our famous Gordon, who's kind of driven a lot of what we're doing here and why we're all here today. I guess the continued challenges for us are just this over-reliance on self-reports of contact and cross-group friendship, maybe this absence of Allport's optimal conditions in some of our strategies for promoting contact, and just neglecting that intergroup aspect that Allport, you know, it involves two groups. So this idea of this dynamism between contact and this exchange of what might need to happen in order for prejudice to be reduced. The other kind of informed literature here with e-contact is this fact that we're all on the internet. Here's some stats about who's using the internet, and this idea by Posmus and Spears that said, look, the internet's really the social microcosm. You know, it is this dynamism of what might be going on between an in-group and an out-group, but it allows us to kind of investigate this microcosm when there's not direct contact, when they're not actually meeting. And it's not a novel thing to say that, you know, the internet provides an opportunity for intergroup contact for segregated groups. That's nothing novel. Hamburger, McKenna, the Solier Connect program, all of these dissolving boundaries programs in Northern Ireland, they've all kind of integrated the internet in involve the internet in segregated societies to promote intergroup contact. So that's not the novel aspect of e-contact. What I will go into is what is. So I was aware of these two competing literatures, so Allport and then the internet and then this idea, and I thought, well, what do we need as a contact strategy that actually operationalizes it? So it's a computer-mediated communication where two groups, so an intergroup context, meet each other, but in a text chat tool format with the aim of achieving a common goal together. So that's pretty much trying to operationalize those conditions. So next slide kind of shows that. So we've got, you know, the equal status condition of Allport, and what I try to do is that students are equalised on gender, their status as students, or they might contribute equally to the intergroup situation. Then there's a cooperative element in the e-chat that they have online, and that could be working together to solve some sort of solution. And that common goal or that solution could be, well, how do uni students transition from high school to university? How do we resolve some environmental sustainability problem? how do we resolve some kind of work-life balance, depending on what the sample is and what a common goal might be for that intergroup connection. And then the authority very much is this kind of moderator that oversees this kind of contact situation. So there's supervision involved in this contact. So the very first study was conducted, as I said, with Muslim and Christian students, the DICE study, and it involved 92 Muslim students and, as it says, 96 Catholic students, and they were in segregated schools in Sydney. So even though Sydney's this, multi-diverse society, it's kind of multiculturalism, but a segregated multiculturalism, yeah? So there's diversity, but segregation. And so these segregated schools still exist. So what I did was I went to each school and set up this e-contact situation, but it happened over 3 years. They were in year 7 where I got pre-test, then I ran 8 weeks of the e-contact scenario when they were in year 8, and then I did 3 lots of post-tests, 2 weeks post-test, 6 months post-test, and 12 months post-test to measure the effects of this collaboration. This is one of the kind of e-contact scenarios. I'll just let you read it, but just know that when it's the student starts with S, it's the Catholic student, and when it starts with M, it's the Muslim student. And they're asked to discuss, what do Catholics and Muslims have in common? So, as you can see, the last kind of things is there's all these differences, and then they come to the end and say, oh, so we do believe in Mary and she's the mother of Jesus. Oh, that's cool. That's something in common. So this is this kind of exchange, this dynamism, this synchronicity that's occurring in this intergroup kind of situation. And when I ran those over 8 weeks, so they're 50-minute intergroup sessions over 8 weeks, as you can see, some of the effects there. That time 1 is that a pre-test. So you've got the electronic or the e-contact group and the control group. And then at time 4, T4, that's the 12-month follow-up. That's when like when they're in year 9, so 2 years later. But it's 12-month follow-up to the intervention. And you can see that the decrease in the electronic contact group, the blue squares, is still maintained and significantly different to the control condition. And that's a longitudinal finding. Didn't get that though for time 4 on anxiety, just got it up to the 2 weeks post-test. So it doesn't keep decreasing or maintain the decrease at time 3 and time 4 on anxiety. And there's lots of other findings with that. But what I wanted to say was, well, that was the experimental field work employing Allport's conditions. I then created this new lab-based version that was more of a short form version because of the resources involved. Now, Yas is going to come up here and try and get me connected to this YouTube link because it kind of shows you what, again, in this text chat tool I'm trying to achieve. But the thing here in this intergroup context to keep in mind is that the outgroup person is pre-programmed and the moderator is pre-programmed. And that helps us control for the quality of the interactions across sessions. It also helps us resources of recruiting minority participants where numerically it might not be possible. So yes, if you can just increase the size of that. We tried to get this on a separate slide, but not too much success. Okay, so the important thing to, the important thing to see here is that the text typing, it says Jasmine's typing, so you can have use of emoticons. You've got a moderator there saying, so let's just talk about why you've come to university and why you've chosen to study here. And then you've got the participant who then says why they've come and then why the pre-programmed outgroup member has come. And after these series of introductions, which kind of follows the fieldwork version, they come to collaborate on solving a problem, on how to transition to university. And then following that, so I think we can finish that. Following that interlude of coming up with a solution, they thank each other and then they complete the outgroup measures. So that lab-based version of e-contact probably lasts for about 15 minutes. Okay. Now, I've run this, I'll just run through this very quickly. I went and visited Rhiannon at Queen's in 2015, and we involved some Protestants and Catholics in an e-contact lab-based version. and that's the famous Shankill district with the Protestant markings on the curbside there. And what we found was that e-contact participants reported more positive outcome expectancies, outgroup attitudes, and less intergroup anxiety than the controls using this lab-based version. And I guess whereas extended contact can be inconsequential if the outgroup contact member is peripheral, as Tausch has said, e-contact is actually being beneficial even when the interaction partner is a stranger. And I think that's an interesting finding, that this friendship kind of idea that we keep talking about may not necessarily be the case to improve attitudes. Also looked at this in the context of homonegativity, again amongst 140 heterosexual participants, again ran the e-contact lab-based version. And what we found here though, interestingly, we didn't get these huge main effects for e-contact, but we got some interaction effects. And the only group that we got the interaction effect on was male heterosexuals. And so that was interesting. The female heterosexuals, e-contact didn't benefit them because they already reported positive intergroup contact. They already reported low levels of homonegativity, negative attitudes. So it was really hard to change those floor levels. Okay. Then my student Rachel had a look at stigma against people with schizophrenia, again using this lab-based model. Had a really neat design here. They had an intragroup condition, an intergroup condition, and had a control condition. And having these three conditions, and I know Linda talked about the importance of having three conditions last night. Just going back to the basics here, it really served a purpose because we were able to control for the actual exchange and the disclosure of outgroup status versus the non-disclosure of outgroup status. So was it just being in the e-contact situation that created these kind of positive attitudes, or was it the actual interaction with an outgroup member that decreased these? And that was able to be deciphered from this design, but not the previous design. So you can see my mind working on how I can improve the design across each of these studies. So luckily, but of course you need more power, more complex the designs. So we found that there was lower anger, lower fear, and less stereotyping for the e-contact condition. And this is particularly pertinent now in the clinical literature because internet has been a useful tool, or has been used as a tool to help with mental illness and stigma related to it. So what are the strengths? Theory-driven, intergroup, synchronous, text only, so you can engage in the actual situation. The text typing allows for multi-methods or qualitative analysis, as well as the quant methods, pre and post test. And these are the two strengths of other contact strategies. That's why I've got an asterisk there. So specifically, look, what does it do? Possibly equips participants with this sense of self-efficacy, contact self-efficacy, which I actually also measure in all of these studies. How did you feel during this interaction? Was it cooperative? Did you feel equal to your participants? So really manipulated checking all of Allport's conditions there. This version of contact allows for experimental manipulation, and you can change some of those variables in future studies, which is what we intend to do. It looks at intergroup, and it gives both people a voice because all those texts and pre-programmed texts are based on both minority and majority groups members' voices in those interactions and scripts. And this is an interesting idea I had about the limitations. You know, when can we use this? When should we use e-contact? Well, it's probably less likely to be beneficial when, you know, people are extremely low or have high levels of positive contact, but it might also be really bad if these people at this end who are highly extremist in prejudice, yeah, putting them on the internet. So I looked at some of Gordon Hotson's ideas of, you know, these prejudice-prone people. Maybe that middle of the normal curve, maybe this is where we could be targeting some of these contact strategies, particularly e-contact, because the people at the other end, you know, they probably are already egalitarian and we can't shift them very much anyway. And e-contact might be a lesser form of contact than direct anyway for those people down that other end, which is what I found in the homosexual stigma study. Other limitations, we need to compare multiple sessions, long-term outcomes, as I did in the field study. And although we can do a poll analysis of the text, which is really rich data, we still need behavioural analysis of, okay, they've had e-contact, now how does this prepare them for direct contact? So that's something that we're working on with colleagues at the moment. And how do these simulated lab-based versions compare to the real online versions as well. So it may be a preparatory strategy for some people who are just avoidant or anxious of contact. But I remember John Dixon telling me, Fiona, it actually might be the only strategies for some people who will never have direct contact. So it's an interesting way to look at this, but these are all empirical questions that I'm yet to answer in this very new and emerging field of contact. So e-contact provides a very structured and supervised opportunity to interact with the outgroup in a pleasant, collaborative and goal-directed way, you know, employing Allport's tenets. And also it's this nuanced kind of feature that may help reduce initial anxieties to refocus our thinking on what's really important here for all of us, and that's the shared humanity. So thank you very much. There's some e-contact pubs and there's some.
Thank you, Fiona. This is a fascinating talk, fascinating work. It's like, really thank you for sharing this with us. And I actually would like to ask you to speculate on the very last, what you said about when e-contact is not, I don't know what you think, if it's not appropriate or is it dangerous when we're talking with people who have high prejudice? Because when I see that, I think this is perfect for intergroup conflict. Then people actually are actively not being able to get together with each other. So these, building on your point that it might not be suitable there. Why not? And how can we change it?
I think it's a good strategy maybe to prepare people, but then when they're in the e-contact, I think we need really stronger supervision and moderation of that because things can exacerbate, you know what I mean? And I think in high conflict that might happen. So we need to be more stringent and maybe not have the lab-based version in those instances, but maybe have someone actually moderating the structured version with those high conflict. I'm not saying not to use it, I'm just saying we need to change it depending on who we're trying to address. Linda. I'm working on my pre-on.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Mariska. I think this is such interesting stuff and just so far from what I do because I'm not the most technologically advanced person. But I was also thinking, about intergroup conflict settings and how we might have people engaging. And what I was thinking about, particularly in terms of just online media use in the US, is this tendency toward polarization. And so I was wondering if you've actually tested not having the strict supervision of a moderator to see if people kind of police themselves or if they veer off the rails, particularly for the prejudice-prone folks in the middle of the distribution.
You read my mind, Linda. That's in the works. We haven't got that data yet, but University of Sydney Ethics Committee is a big hurdle with that because they're really reluctant, and all the other Australian researchers will be nodding their heads. If there's any exacerbation or a problem for participants, psychologically, then that's an issue. So I'm going to have to argue some sort of case of intervention if that were to happen. So it's more of an ethics committee issue when we're exacerbating issues.